Good evening, everyone. How are you guys? I hope you guys are staying safe, keeping yourself healthy. Very important. And it's been a long weekend for you guys from my end as well. So I hope it's a good day that we start off after a short little break. And we will continue from where we left off. And this is going to be a very important week because this week we are going to connect the dots. We have talked about React, we have talked about Express, we have talked about Node.js. So we have very briefly talked about Express. Now, before we go on and start creating REST APIs and talk about what REST APIs are, we need to understand the very last element of this whole stack, and that is the database element, and that is the MongoDB. And we will try to understand that today. And going forward, we are going to use the packages that are required because we have seen that we can use Node Package Manager to install a lot of packages that helps us to interact with different kind of libraries or helps us to write our code faster, just like our Express. So at this point, we are pretty sure that how things work in MongoDB, Node.js. And now it's a good time that we start off by talking about how things work on the database front. Now, to understand the database front, we might have to first of all understand the flow. And we talked about a lot of flow. We will go to the whiteboard and we will share the screen. So, web flow. Okay. So we talked about front end. You will hear me coughing a lot during the session, so please don't mind. Okay. Maybe Vani, but I will tell you about when we'll have the last session. But yeah, mostly we are planning to do that this week. Backend. And now the backend consists of our database. What is the interaction? I don't know how many of you have worked on JavaScript, but we talked about some interactions. And what is the protocol for this one? For front end to back end? Correct. So we use HTTP protocol. Now, do you think backend to database, when we are trying to connect, do we have the same protocol? Do we have the same protocol? What do you think? Is it going to be the web protocol? What kind of protocol are we going to have? Like, can you give me an idea? Correct, Bikram? So it's more like a data transfer or a file transfer. So there has to be some interaction between my backend system and the database as well, right? And this will depend. Now, mostly sometimes we will use file transfer protocol, or we might use and this whole system works under TCP/IP. TCP/IP. Do you know what TCP/IP is? So this is a more of a communication protocol, is supported over the whole channel, and the socket system, the listening port, and all these words that we are using are part of your TCP/IP. Okay, so when we interact from the front end to back end, and then we go to the back end for the database, what we are doing is we are doing all the similar kind of interaction, but in their own protocol. There is a set rules that we need to follow for each one of them, right? So in terms of full stack development, we divide our backend or our APIs, what we call APIs, in layers. Okay, and most of the time we have this layers called as, first becomes our business logic, then becomes our service layer, then we have the data layer. So how does this work? So when we are writing our backend, we start thinking in terms of how our data is going to flow. Now the business logic will start at the onset when we start receiving some requests. Let's say we receive a GET request for homepage. So when we get this request, the request comes to our backend, and maybe at this point of time, I am fetching that request or getting that request. Now, what I'm saying is get the details for the home page. तो जो भी डेटा चाहिए हमें होम पेज के लिए, वो हमारे बिजनेस लॉजिक को पता चलेगा, and what business logic will do is it will send it to the service layer, and service layer will have different logics. Okay, so it will look for a logic of wherever I am fetching this data from. So whatever function for /home, let's say I have a function called get user. Okay, so there is a function called get user, क्योंकि सबसे पहले हमने उसको redirect कर दिया, and get user function में समझ में आ जाएगा कि home के लिए हमें get user details चाहिए. Let's say we are building a profile or details of that particular person. Now this function needs to fetch some data. So it needs to fetch some data, which means it will contact the data layer. Okay, and this data layer is going to have the interaction with my database. Okay, now this database is kind of the interface. This database layer is going to be a kind of interface between my backend and my database, right? And this is where I'm going to make all the, let's say if we are working on MongoDB specific instructions, right? So when we say MongoDB specific instructions, that means what is suitable for MongoDB. There are a lot of different databases, right? And those databases can have their own way of understanding the instructions. So we are going to stick to MongoDB. This whole structure is defined as MVC, right? What does MVC mean? Does anyone know what MVC means? Correct. Model, view, and controller. So this is kind of an architecture. This architecture helps us to define our web interactions. तो इसमें view क्या हुआ? What is view? So this is model, view, and controller. What does model come? Where does model come as MVC architecture? Where is our model? What does model mean? Before you answer where is model, what does model mean? Anyone who can tell me what does model mean? Like एक जनरल टर्मिनोलॉजी में सोचो कि मेरे को एक डेटा मॉडलिंग करना है. If I'm saying I want to do data modeling, yeah, correct, kind of a design or a structure. Yeah, so in this structure, where would our data come into picture? How our data is going to look like, or what is the data that I'm going to use? So let's say I am creating a backend and I am sending a data like this. And this is name, whatever name is, and age, let's say 12. Is this a model or is this the data? What do you think? This is the data, right? Now, if I specify this as model, so I am defining what kind of data I'm going to use. So I will say name is going to be a type of string and age is going to be a type of number. This is the model of the data. Like if I'm trying to store a data, it should be having this model. That means अगर आप नाम डाल रहे हो तो वो string data type से डालना, अगर आप age डाल रहे हो तो number data type से डालना. So this becomes our model. Make sense? We are defining our model and based on the request or response that I am creating, उससे हम उस type का data fetch कर रहे हैं and we are putting it in our model. Does it make sense? Any doubts here? Anyone having any kind of doubt? Is it clear to all those who are here right now? All right, should I go ahead? Because this is a very important concept that you need to understand. Because once we start writing code, you will come back and you will have to take a look at how this flow and then relate it to whatever we are writing as a code. Because code क्या होता है, बहुत अलग अलग लैंग्वेजेस में अलग अलग तरीके से लिखते हैं, बट अंडरलाइंग सिस्टम सेम होगा. लिखने का तरीका अलग होगा, बट द कॉन्सेप्ट एंड लॉजिक बिहाइंड इट will remain the same. So this is the model part. So I can rightly say that my model is going to be the database, right? My model part is going to be taken care by database. You agree? Disagree? Okay, looks like responsive नहीं हो आप लोग आज, या समझ नहीं आ रहा है? आ रहा है? ठीक है, चलो, I'll anyway continue. What is the view part? Definitely the view is going to be something that is, yeah, front end in this sense. So मेरा view जो होगा वो front end हो जाएगा और जो controller part है वो मेरा हो जाएगा back end part, because this is where the control is happening for all the data, right? This is where the control is happening for all the data. We have a front end which is being handled by React. ठीक है, उसको डेटा मिल रहा है, वो अपना डेटा रिसीव करके उस डेटा को अपने तरीके से हैंडल कर रहा है फ्रंट एंड में. बैक एंड को रिक्वेस्ट मिल रही है, रिक्वेस्ट रिस्पॉन्स मॉडल, it is getting its request response model in the node environment using, we will do express when we start creating this request response model, and based on this request response it is fetching the data from our database. So our database is going to reply to us in terms of supplying data, let's say, ठीक है, based on the kind of request. तो React के एक click से, let's say I click on login, or let's not talk about login, I want to click on like button on a photo. So when I click on the like button on a photo, what I'm doing is my front end is handling that, okay, the like button has been clicked. I will capture this data and I will send it to the backend. So in our React component, we have written that logic where we capture the data that, okay, this person has liked this button, and it clicks on that like button, and that becomes a request, goes to the backend, and backend receive that, okay, so and so, let's say John has liked Jane's photo. So there is a network, there is a model on which this whole system is working. So they would have to have a model where they can capture this kind of data, right? So when they are trying to capture this kind of data, the like will come over here. They would have written some functionalities, just like get user, they might have written a capture like functionality, and that capture like is going to get saved in the database so that this data is available whenever John comes back and sees whatever has been liked, as well as my and Jane should be also be able to see who has liked her photo. Make sense? So this small little button follows this whole ecosystem, this whole cycle. Is it making sense how this works? Okay. So let's take another example to make it better, and I will write it this time. Let's say I say click on a button which says get, or let's say show photos. So what I'm doing is I am generating a request from the front end. तो ये मेरा button हो गया front end का. I'll just remove this web flow from the top. Yeah. Now this will create a request for my backend, and that request is going to be a get request because I am trying to get some data. Okay? So this is going to create a get request, and there will be a backend where I'm trying to hit this, and we will have a backend with the name of get photos. So ये request मैंने front end से generate की. Just as a user, think as a user ने क्या किया, click किया show photos पे. तो get photos पे एक generate किया हमने request, and that request comes to the backend. Backend sees that, okay, it is working on 8080 port, and my backend is going to handle and check कि चलो ठीक है get request आ रहा है. So इसके लिए get photos का जो भी function है, जो भी method हमने लिखा है, वो return करेगा photos, return array और जो भी है. Usually photos are in buffers, but I'm just going to write photos for now for better understanding. So this comes as a part of backend get photos. अब ये return कैसे करेगा? Backend में कोई डेटा तो है नहीं या हमने स्टोर किया नहीं है. हम स्टोर कर सकते हैं using the limited memory of the system, but we would want to have a larger system which can handle this, right? And that is just specifically for the database. So this return part and this population of this particular array is going to come from the database. So we fetch, or we say read the database, and while reading it returns photos. Okay, whatever maybe the photos, however it is stored, it returns me the photo. And then again this photo goes to the value over here. We create a response, and this becomes our response. तो get के बाद जो भी हम यहाँ पे response create करेंगे, that becomes, and on the front end, as soon as we receive, based on this click, we change the layout, or we load a new component. Let's say a square box, something like this, and it has all the photos aligned the way we want it. Like let's say we have 3 photos, तो वो 3 फोटो हमने जैसे डेटा रिसीव किया वो दिख गया. Does it make sense? कि कैसे एक क्लिक पे how everything works. So this is how the whole thing works. This is the system of our full stack. But इसको करने के लिए there are a lot of protocols that we are using. One such protocol is HTTP, जिसके basis पे हम बोल रहे ठीक है, this is a get request, or this is a post request, or this is a put request, or a delete request. But in case of our structure, backend structure, should I remove this? I'll save it just in case you guys need it. I'll remove all the drawing. So to do this, there has been multiple architectures. One is the SOAP architecture, and another one is the REST architecture. Okay. So SOAP was used. Yeah, I'll do that, Anna. So SOAP was used, and it was mostly an XML-based language, XML-based architecture. Okay. So when we talk about XML-based architecture, the data we are sending in today's world are in a couple of formats, two formats. One format is your XML, another format is your JSON. There are more such formats, but we will stick to the one very popularly used for transacting the data. Okay, so XML क्या होता है? Basically XML format होगा जो हमने HTML लिखा है ना, that was initially used as an XML format to pass the data. HTML जब शुरू हुआ था तो it was just used to pass the data on the internet, and that was the language it was used. So let's say I have a user data जिसके अंदर name का value है, ऐसा करके J लिख देते हैं, और age का value है, ठीक है? Not like this, 12, let's say. तो ये मेरा बन जाता XML डेटा, और इस टाइप के 1000 डेटा हम क्रिएट करते और सेंड करते रहते. JSON डेटा सिमिलर चीज का हमें इस फॉर्मेट में मिलता है, की वैल्यू पेयर पे. सो लेट्स जस्ट यूज दिस नेम and we will call it J, the value, and this one goes as age and the value 12. Now how does this work? What does this mean? Which looks better, the JSON part or the XML part? If we relate it to our objects or the stack that we are working on, JSON looks much better, much relatable in terms of object, and that's why it is called JavaScript object notation. तो जो हमारा SOAP architecture था वो mostly data transfer करता था in the form of XML. Alright, okay. And there were some HTTP methods that were also a part of this, and that was just get and some post. I will just move it on top over here. Get use post नहीं था, sorry, post नहीं था इसमें. So इसमें HTTP methods का सिर्फ get हम use कर पाते थे. Then they started creating this started creating an issue, और हमें better way चाहिए था to interact with the backend and to create more better interaction. Came the concept of REST. What is REST? REST का full form पता है किसी को? It's called representational, if I get the spelling right, representational state transfer. This is called representational state transfer. Why is it called representational state transfer? Because REST does not care that how your request is formed, how you are creating a response. It does not care about anything. So let me see if I can open the previous thing that I have saved. Give me a second. I'll just go ahead and open the thing that we have saved right now. Let me see if this is the one. No. All right, I'll not waste time in that. So we have the front end. I'll just say React. Then we have our backend with Node.js. and we will have database soon. Yeah. So what REST API does is, as soon as the request is created, it comes over here, and it delivers the request to my backend. My backend happily, if there is a request for getting some photos or getting some data from database, it fetches that data and returns it to the component initially, and it creates a response and sends it back, right? तो इस पूरे ड्यूरेशन में ना ही Node.js को पता था कि कैसा रिक्वेस्ट आने वाला है, ना ही उसको रिक्वेस्ट भेजने के रिस्पॉन्स भेजने के बाद पता है कि वो रिस्पॉन्स गया कहाँ. Node.js does not know what this response, where did this response go, right? What we are doing is we are just taking the response and putting it in React, right? So I created a request over here that get items, let's say. I created this request and I got a list of items. I got this list of items as a response. But in this process, neither did Node.js know that what was the request like, except for the method previous to this request where the data was and where this request is going. All it needs to know is what we need to do when the request arises. And it says, okay, I have get items as a function in the backend. I will just execute it. Who is responsible for sending the item list? So what we are doing is we are transferring a state. Initial state is get item. So when I click on this, I am passing a clicked state, and that state travels back, because maybe on the click I am capturing the request of get items, and that click of get items comes and hits Node.js because we are creating a request in such a way. It comes over here, gets us the data, and the state has been modified, or it might not be modified depending on the HTTP methods, and we will talk about that. Listen to that very carefully. So at the moment, we are just getting the data from the database. Database returns me some list, and we create a response and send it to React, which is the item list. So in this whole thing, what we are doing is we are just transferring the state of the user. Does it make sense? कि यूजर ने क्लिक किया, उसी चीज को हमने पास किया, उस पर हमने एक एक्शन लिया, उससे एक रिस्पॉन्स क्रिएट किया, और उस रिस्पॉन्स क्रिएट करके उसको अपने फ्रंट एंड में यूज किया. And this is what representational state transfer means in a very simple layman terms, right? So similarly, HTTP methods use करते हैं इनको represent करने के लिए. So these are HTTP methods which will actually might change or not change the state of the data. So let's say we have get, post, put, and delete. These are the methods that we use mostly. Do you think get changes the state? Do you think get changes the state? सबने नो बोला. Obviously, it does not change the state. What we are doing is we are just fetching the data from the database, right? So this becomes our idempotent method. What does idempotent method means? That we can make several such get requests and it won't change any kind of a state. Right? Does it make sense? No? Yes? idempotent का मतलब है कि हम get request कितने बार भी भेजें, same response is going to get created. So if I send get request, Node.js पे database पे जाएगा, it will fetch me the same number of items based on the click. अगर हमने ऐसी functionality दी हुई है. So this becomes idempotent. What do you think about delete? Is it idempotent? No? Are you sure? Well, delete is an idempotent request. So imagine potent, yeah. Idempotent, yeah. Imagine first time we make a request to delete, let's say user. It goes to the database, right, and deletes that, deletes user from DB, and we create a response that user is successfully deleted. I make this same request for the same user. What am I going to get for the second time? Let's say delete the same user. So what we are going to get is a response that it does not exist, right? Or 404. 404 basically, right? Not available. If I make this request again, what is the response that is going to get generated? 404. Now, every subsequent, once initially, what we are doing is, we are not making the state change. We are making the state change initially for the very first request. That हमने database का जो state था, एक user delete करने से भी वो state change होगा ना? If you remember how we handled state. Yes? Yes? No? जब हम delete करते हैं कोई user, database का state change होगा? Database का state change होगा कि नहीं होगा? Right? क्योंकि इनिशियली लेट्स से हमने जॉन को डिलीट कर दिया, तो पहले जॉन था, अब जॉन नहीं है. ठीक है? तो what we are doing is the state remains the same. It is a little confusing that delete कैसे idempotent होता है, but first request of delete is not considered as like a state change, क्योंकि subsequent request का हमारा 404 आएगा. So that's why it is considered as an idempotent. What do you think about post? Is post idempotent? No? Confused? कितने लोग confused हैं इससे? How many of you are confused with this? Okay. Correct. There will be continuous state change. So it's a non-idempotent method. Item nahi, item. It's a non-idempotent method. Why it is a non-idempotent method is because it has, let's say I am saving a data. I have a save button, which I click, which takes certain data inside this and saves it to database. What I am doing is I am changing the state. अब अगर मैंने same data भेजा या कोई भी data भेजा, तो वो डेटाबेस का स्टेट कंटिन्यूअसली चेंज करेगा, राइट? It is going to change the state of the data. We are growing on the data, right? So that's why this is important to understand that post is a non-idempotent method because it will keep on changing the state of the backend. Because जब भी हम define करते हैं ये idempotent method, we consider our backend state. हमेशा backend के terms में सोचते हैं. Front end से हम बस request generate कर रहे हैं. उस रिक्वेस्ट जनरेट होने के बाद बैकएंड में क्या इफेक्ट हो रहा है उससे डिफाइन होता है कि आइडेमपोटेंट है कि नहीं. तो जितने बार सेव दबाएंगे उतने बार नया डेटा सेव होगा हमारे बैकएंड में. मेक सेंस? तो फॉर्म से जब हम सबमिट करते हैं, डेटा, तो हम लोग क्या कर रहे हैं कि नया डेटा हर बार ऐड कर रहे हैं, राइट? What do you think about put? Idempotent or not? Is put idempotent or not? Sunil says yes, Nitin says no. Venkatesh says no. क्यों no? Let's say I am editing an existing data. जॉन को ही एज एडिट किया हमने. तो हमने बोला, हमने डेटा सेंड किया कि एज 12 से 13 हो गया है, 13 हो गया है. तो जब हमने एज सेंड किया, राइट, एज जब सेंड किया तो इसका रिस्पॉन्स क्या होगा कि हाँ ठीक है आपका डेटा अपडेट हो गया है. हमने कोई नया डेटा नहीं ऐड किया, हमने ना कोई पुराना रिक्वेस्ट किया. अब जितने बार हम एज चेंज का डेटा भेजेंगे, लेट्स से नेक्स्ट ईयर 14 कर दिया, वो सेम रिस्पॉन्स देगा मेरे को, करेक्ट? सेम रिस्पॉन्स देगा कि आपका डेटा चेंज हो गया है, आपका डेटा हैज बीन एडिटेड. सो व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट स्टेट, आई एम टॉकिंग इन टर्म्स ऑफ द वॉल्यूम ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर डेटा. पोस्ट में क्या हो रहा है कि एक नया रो बन जा रहा है, इफ वी कॉल इट इन टर्म्स ऑफ डेटा, या एक नया डेटा ऐड हो जा रहा है. पुट में क्या हो रहा है, एग्जिस्टिंग डेटा का ही हम वैल्यूज चेंज कर रहे हैं, राइट? Number of values, when I say volume, number of values. So put is also an idempotent method. Put का मतलब होता है कि हम कोई चीज, put request का मतलब ही होता है कि we are trying to edit something. Post is non-idempotent. Yeah, only post is non-idempotent. There are multiple other HTTP requests, but these are the major ones that you will come across. Okay, so put is called every time we want to edit some data. Post is called whenever we are trying to save some data. It will change the individual value. It will edit the individual value. It will not change the complete value, right? कि एक नया रो नहीं ऐड हो जा रहा है, या there is no new data that is being added into this, right? So whenever we are making this request, whenever we are making these kind of request, this is a very important concept of why we are using REST architecture, and these are called the RESTful methods. And REST architecture implements this get, post, put and delete. ठीक है, तो ये एक तरीका है. Now what is API? What does API means? Application Program Interface. What does this mean? हम लोग बोलते हैं REST API. So REST is one thing, representational state transfer, वो state transfer करता है, but API क्या होता है? Application Program Interface. So let's understand this now. Imagine you are, how many of you have PlayStation? PlayStation 5 खरीदा क्या किसी ने? Or anyone planning to buy or likes to play games over here? ठीक है, कोई नहीं. PlayStation या रिमोट से तो काम किया ही होगा. I'm thinking of PlayStation 5, but अभी तक आया नहीं है. आ गया, रिलीज हो गया, but I'm still thinking थोड़ा महंगा है. Anyway, so this becomes our, let's say this is a TV, this is our sofa, and this is where I am sitting, let's suppose, and there is a small remote in between. तो इसमें ये बताओ, ये हो गया user or let's say binge watcher, as we do nowadays. This is the remote, right? This is the remote and this is the TV. How is this watcher interacting with the TV? Using the remote, right? So remote is a way of interacting between these particular these two things. So TV को information मिल रही है binge watcher के बटन दबाने से, correct? Application program interface similarly काम करता है. जब हम लोग अपने सिस्टम पे देख रहे हैं, so right now you are watching me speak about API on your screens. So you are using a program, right? You are using a program. Now, I am the application, right? I am the application. So I am talking about what is API. And the interface between you and me is Zoom, correct? So there is an interaction. So I am the application, you are the program, and Zoom is the interface. So similarly, in web-based architecture, when we create our backend, we call them as APIs, Application Program Interface. In that sense, the application part is the backend part. Interface is the request that we are generating, and program is the front end part from where the requests are getting generated. ठीक है? तो backend starts acting like a application which is going to help us create endpoints. So REST API का मतलब समझ में आया? जब भी REST API आप देखोगे तो आपको अब समझ में आ जाएगा कि ठीक है, this architecture is a REST architecture and API is the endpoint, or there is a program that will be handling some request depending on get, post, put, delete type के request handle कर सकता है. Yes, so it is a connect. तो पहले होता क्या था, दिस इज अ MVC आर्किटेक्चर, राइट? पहले क्या होता था, दिस होल वेब आर्किटेक्चर वाज मोनोलिथिक इन नेचर. व्हेन आई से मोनोलिथिक, फ्रंट एंड भी एक जगह लिखा जा रहा है, बैक एंड भी एक जगह लिखा जा रहा है, और डेटाबेस के लिए भी एक ही सिस्टम में हम यूज कर रहे हैं. अब क्या हुआ है, हम लोग सब चीज सेपरेट आउट कर लिए. एज यू कैन सी, फ्रंट एंड अलग है, बैक एंड अलग है, और डेटाबेस अलग है, राइट? सो व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट दिस स्टफ ओवर हियर, yes, like PHP, something similar. तो अब हमारे पास अलग अलग चीजें हैं सारी, और सबका अपना अपना काम है. रिएक्ट सिर्फ व्यू को हैंडल करेगा, Node.js मेरा बैकएंड का रिक्वेस्ट हैंडल करेगा. तो ये मेरा हो जाएगा API क्रिएशन वाला, which is going to have a REST architecture, and DB is going to be the place where I am going to store my data. So when I talk about REST APIs, there are going to be endpoints associated with this, right? So let's take a look at APIs. I will open some website for you, which is basically an API. अब उस website को आप लोग देखोगे, so it will make more sense to you. Give me a second. I will just get that website open. समझ में आ रहा है पूरा आर्किटेक्चर? एंड दिस इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कॉन्सेप्ट. हम लोग अभी कोड नहीं कर रहे हैं, हम लोग बहुत ज्यादा थियोरेटिकल नॉलेज गेन कर रहे हैं, बिकॉज दिस विल हेल्प अस टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हेन वी आर कोडिंग. ओके, सो दिस इज अ वेबसाइट कॉल्ड JSON placeholder dot typecode.com, and what it does is it gives us some free data. JSON सर्वर से हमें डेटा देता है. तो how do I do it? Yeah. So as you can see, it says JSON placeholder comes with 6 set of common resources: post, comments, album, photos, whatever. So these are the free data. और इनके routes हैं. It says all HTTP methods are supported. You can use HTTP or HTTPS for your request. Does this line make sense to you now? Does it make sense to all of you? That what it is trying to say? That all HTTP methods are supported. You can use HTTP or HTTPS for your request. So when I'm talking about request, I'm pretty sure that there is a front end involved from where I'm going to make a request to this particular website. And you see we have put, post, patch, delete. So patch is another kind of method, but get is the one that it gives us a lot of data. So when I click on this, have you seen this kind of a data coming from our backend? हमने जब सर्वर क्रिएट किया था और बोला था एप्लीकेशन JSON, इन्होंने भी कुछ ऐसा ही किया, राइट? ये एंड पॉइंट है, इस एंड पॉइंट पे हिट किया तो इन्होंने बोला कि चलो डेटा चाहिए इसको, तो वी विल गिव हिम द डेटा. एंड आई हैव सो मेनी डेटास एंड ईच डेटा इज हैविंग द JSON फॉर्मेट. ये व्यू शायद आपके सिस्टम में ना आए बिकॉज आई हैव दिस एक्सटेंशन इंस्टॉल्ड कॉल्ड JSON व्यूअर. Okay, you will get the raw format, but I have this JSON viewer installed in my as a plugin in my Chrome, so this gets viewed as a JSON format or a object format. But agar aap log khologe, I'll just pass it on to you guys so that if you want to just take a look over here. Yeah, so if you try to take a look, you will get a raw format, and that is the JSON format. So this is the endpoint. So ideally what would be happening is someone would be sending data or we are sending a request to this endpoint. This is the endpoint we are trying to hit. And this endpoint, इनका जो backend processing होगा उसमें इनको समझ में आ गया होगा कि किसी ने अगर /post करके request भेजी है तो हमें ये data fetch करके भेजना है उनको. And there will be like hundreds of data, I think 100 data. Yeah. तो 100 data है इनके पास और वो उन्होंने भेज दिया. And this is a REST architecture. Similar to this, we can post data, but not most of the companies will let you post data on their database, because then if you start using these kind of APIs and start using post request, you will start putting a lot of dirty data or unused data, and it will start hampering their backend. So बहुत जगह आप लोग को पैसे देके API use करना पड़ेगा, right? And API creating companies are earning a lot. You can create your own APIs. You can work with you can deploy your own API in the GitHub and say that, okay, you can use my API because it solves certain problem. I will show you one such example called Rapid API. As you can see, this is Rapid API. Now this is a global comprehensive website which actually is kind of a marketplace where you can go and buy APIs for your product, for your solution, or if you just want to have testing. तो marketplace अगर मैं दिखाता हूँ तो I'm just letting you know how important APIs are, because APIs पे सब चीजें चल रही हैं आजकल. let it load. By the time it loads, now you can use a lot of APIs. अलग-अलग companies की API available है, and if you want to use these APIs, you might want to buy certain application or certain part of it. And as you can see, makes easy to connect any kind of architecture. We talked about REST and SOAP. There is this new architecture of GraphQL. GraphQL किसका है पता है? GraphQL is also an architecture, just like REST. GraphQL किसका है? Sure? Facebook का है? नहीं, correct. Nikhil is correct. It's Facebook. Yeah. So it's a query language for the APIs. It's like मतलब ये GraphQL जो है is a query language for the APIs. Like depending on आपको कौन सी query चाहिए, sorry API चाहिए या endpoint चाहिए, उस पे query लिख सकते हैं. I'm not going to go into GraphQL. It is another interesting topic. But there are many APIs depending on that, and you can consume any kind of APIs. So let's see if go to the marketplace and show you some of the APIs. All right, let it open. So there are a lot of free APIs just like this. So this is a free API which is providing you data, and this is all dummy data. If you want to fetch Facebook ka data, will you be able to do it? No, obviously not. Even though Facebook is able to do it with our own request. But as you can see, there are a lot of APIs that you can use over here. Let me say something that we have already used before. Popular APIs mein chalta hai. Recipe, food, nutrition. So this is a free API which we can use and create our project on. And there is a proper documentation of each API. And you see it says get extract recipe from particular website. And here it says node में कैसे लिखना है. अब आप backend का कोई भी language उठा लो और उसका अलग से it is going to tell you कि उसका code कैसा होगा. तो हम लोग we are more interested in Node.js only right now because it is very popular और automatically ये बोल रहा है कि Node.js में हमें क्या चाहिए होगा इसका पैकेज, हमें क्या चाहिए होगा ये API, इस unrest इनका जो भी मेथड है, एंड रिक्वेस्ट क्वेरी हमें इनके API को रिक्वेस्ट करना पड़ेगा. सो बेसिकली हम अपने बैकएंड से भी एक नया रिक्वेस्ट क्रिएट कर रहे हैं, राइट? डज इट मेक सेंस कि हमने लेट्स से आई एम क्रिएटिंग दिस recipe finder kind of an application, and a user clicks on a button on the main page or on a component, and that button gives a request to my Node.js. अब Node.js को ये पता है हमारे पास कोई बैकएंड नहीं है, हमने कोई डेटाबेस नहीं रखा है, हमने बोला कि हमारा काम ये वाला API कर देगा. We don't have to create or store the database. तो हम लोग ने बोला कि ठीक है, अब हम अपने बैकएंड से भी एक गेट रिक्वेस्ट क्रिएट करते हैं एंड सेंड इट टू दिस पर्टिकुलर एंड पॉइंट. सो ये हो गया तुम्हारा डेस्टिनेशन एंड ये हो गया तुम्हारा मेथड. एंड देन इट सेज व्हाट इज द क्वेरी कि हमें बेस्ट फजी ब्राउनीज का रेसिपी चाहिए. लेट्स से आई क्लिक्ड ऑन अ बेस्ट फजी ब्राउनी बटन and it generates this particular URL there, and we are sending that request from our backend. और कुछ headers हैं, तो ये headers जो हैं, this is basically authentication, saying कि ऐसे randomly आप जाके नई requests raise कर सकते हो. You need to have this key, and this key will be generated once you sign up on different APIs. So sometimes when you are generating this key and start using this, it will start charging you. Some are the free APIs, some use the some charges some value for the usage, or some has some limited uses कि per day आप 2 request कर सकते हो, 3 request कर सकते हो. Okay, so once you have created the request, what we are doing is we are ending it and sending this function कि ठीक है ये request भेज दो और जो भी response है मेरे body में console.log कर लो. ये कोड समझ में आ रहा है? Completely नहीं समझ में आ रहा है if it is not very clear at the moment? Well and good. But are you able to understand the flow, that what APIs are for, like how we can create or connect with different kind of data, right? So this was the get request. What if I want to post some details कि ठीक है, मैंने मेरी खुद की एक रेसिपी है, तो हमें मेरे को भी एक डिटेल्स बनाना है, तो जब भी हम लोग रिस्पॉन्स क्रिएट करेंगे एक बॉडी आ जाएगा, उसमें कुछ डेटा भी हमें सेंड करना है. सो वी रिसीव दैट रिक्वेस्ट, पोस्ट रिक्वेस्ट, एंड create a data in this format. Let's say I'm creating one data. There can be many data like this. और उसमें ये सारी चीजें required है. So this becomes our model of the data. Make sense? That we have ID, original, name, amount, unit, image. So this becomes the model. And we might want to do it. We might want to post the data. Data post from our local code. Obviously, this everything that you're seeing has to be done in your local code. ये इन्होंने बताया कि यूज कैसे करना है, ये नहीं कि आप यहीं पे करके आपका काम बन जाएगा. फ्रंट एंड एंड तो है ही नहीं इसका. What we are doing is we are just using the code in our backend. तो इन्होंने बेसिकली एक API बनाई हुई है जो हम यूज करेंगे. गेट रिक्वेस्ट पे ये सारे रिक्वेस्ट जाएंगे, पोस्ट पे क्या डेटा चाहिए, देन अगेन गेट रिक्वेस्ट पे हमें क्या क्या डेटा मिलेगा रिस्पॉन्स में. So they tell us that what kind of data are we going to get based on each one of them. So this is what we are talking about APIs. So how do we create these APIs? These APIs are created using Express, Node, and at the moment we are going to create our own databases and work with our own database. Sounds interesting how things are turning out for this one? तो अभी के लिए हम लोग ने यहाँ पे एक कोड लिखा था नोड का, जिसमें हमने एक बहुत बेसिक सा कोड लिखा था फॉर द सर्वर. वेयर डिड वी इंक्लूड? नो. सो दिस वाज द बेसिक कोड दैट वी हैव रिटन. तो हमने एक्सप्रेस एग्जाम्पल पैकेज यहाँ पे यूज किया था. वेयर डिड वी यूज द सर्वर? सॉरी, रेस्ट एक्सप्रेस. ओके, दिस इज ऑन द टॉप. या सो यहाँ पे हमने वो package.json में बोला था कि Express install करो और we are going to use it. Now before we start using Express and creating our endpoints, और हमने यहाँ पे similar to what you see, we have created an API, and all this REST API architecture and MVC architecture has been handled by these frameworks automatically. And that's why the beauty of these stacks have, or the popularity of the stacks have increased so much over the years. Okay? तो इसके पहले we need to understand कि हम database कैसे create करें और how does our database work. So उसके लिए we are going to have this MongoDB. अब इसके लिए भी हमें कुछ install करना पड़ेगा definitely, and to do that we need to understand what are the things that are required to have the MongoDB in our system. Now there are two ways of doing it. Most of the things are deployed, but first of all we will understand it on a local basis, and then we would want to understand it on a global basis. So there are multiple ways of creating databases, and let's go ahead and take a look. So as you know, we are going to take a look at the original website of MongoDB, the authentic website. One second. Yeah. So this is the original website of MongoDB. You guys can see this. I've shared the link with you. So to get started, what we need is we need the Mongo Shell edition first of all, which is basically installing the MongoDB in our local system. So when you are trying to create or install MongoDB, you need to connect to Mongo shell. Now, how do I install it? So to do that, we will go to installation, and here it tells us that what installation do we need, and we will stick to the community edition. We don't want the enterprise edition because enterprise editions is basically for bigger companies with a lot of data. And if you are on Windows or Linux or Mac, depending on your system, you can choose the option. So once you choose this option, this will take you through a process. Now the prerequisites are here. Xcode, ये मेरा, you can install in a different way. Let me show you Windows ka. This is for Mac. Windows will make more sense at the moment. So here, once we are installing it, you download it and run the installer. Once you have done the installation, run as a service, you need to make sure that you create this data folder, okay? Because this data folder is where your local database is, or whatever you are saving from your local data or from your local application is going to save. So basically हमारा जो local system है, that is going to provide me the space. हम local system का space use करेंगे. When we start growing and we have a lot of data, we might want to shift to a cloud deployed database or something like that. But initially, we will stick to data in our local system. So make sure that you create this data. Now, once you create this data, there are a couple of things that you can work with. So to start the MongoDB server, you will have to run this command. Okay, it's like executing the exe file. Okay, and apart from this, you want to view the data, right? You want to view the data sometimes, that how your MongoDB looks like, or the data that you are creating is stored. So this is Mongo Compass, and there is another thing called Robo3D. So I have used Robo3D. You can use Compass as well. This is basically a CLI tool, which helps you to view the data that you have stored. ठीक है? तो दूसरी चीज है रोबो मोंगो, जो कि सेम काम करता है जो कंपास करता है. इट हेल्प्स यू विजुअलाइज योर डेटा, सी द डेटा जो भी आपका सेव हो रहा है. एंड द सेकंड थिंग इज रोबो मोंगो. सो what you need to do is, this is just a robo download robo 3D only. You don't want the studio version. And what this gives you is a details of the data that you have in your system. बेसिकली अ व्यू आप अपने टर्मिनल में भी देख सकते हो सेम चीज, बट इट्स लाइक अ GUI फॉर योर डेटा. So I will show you how Robo 3D looks like, and I have installed Robo 3D. I will share my desktop one. As you can see, once you have installed MongoDB in your system and Robo 3D in your system, it will ask for a local host. So does it look like that it is also taking another space in my system? There is another port जहाँ पे सिर्फ database का काम हो रहा है. So once you create it, connect, unreachable, yeah. So it says unreachable. Why? Because my database is shut at the moment. तो जो command अभी मैंने आपको दिखाया था, उस command को आपको run करना पड़ेगा अपने system में. For my system, I am going to run MongoD. That means this is the command to start my MongoDB server in my local system. So if I run this, you will see some details. So what I'm doing is I'm just starting the MongoDB server. Okay, there is an exception. Oh, yeah. So see what happened. Data/db not found. That's why it is terminating. So it is very important to create that DB path, right? So when it is starting a server, it is going to look for that data part where I want to store this database or store this data. And that's why it is unable to start. All right. Does it make sense? समझ में आ रहा है? तो अब बेसिकली मेरे को एक डेटा बनाना पड़ेगा, फोल्डर बनाना पड़ेगा. दिस इज अ मैक सिस्टम. फॉर यू गाइस आल्सो यू नीड टू क्रिएट दैट डेटा. And once you create that data folder, you will be able to access the database system and you will be able to see the data over here. Now before we do that, we need to understand how this works. कि कहाँ पे ये data store होगा, कैसे store होगा, क्या करना है. So for that, we are going to create or work on this MongoDB. And for this, I will create an app.js file. And I will go inside MongoDB first of all. तो अब आपको देख रहे हो, अगर आपको तीनों चीजें चलानी है तो you will have to start a React server, you will have to start a Node.js server, and then you will have to start a MongoDB server. Make sense? 3 different servers आपको अपने सिस्टम में चलाने होंगे, right? Everything is decoupled. Things are separated out modular wise and it is decoupled. So before I go ahead and create the file for this, what I want to show you is there is a package that we are going to use. It is called an ORM and that is called Mongoose. And not the Mongoose, yes, the ODM. Not the Mongoose that you see on your right, animal, but an ODM. Now, what does ODM means? ODM means Object Data Model. तो हमने अभी तक जो कोड देखा है, लेट्स टेक अ वेरी स्मॉल एग्जांपल दैट वी हैव टिल नाउ. हमने यहाँ पे रिस्पॉन्स सेंड कर दिया है, राइट? और होम पे अपने से रिस्पॉन्स सेंड कर दिया. अब हमें क्या करना है, यहाँ से डेटा उठाना है और ले जाके डेटाबेस पे हिट करना है. एंड बेस्ड ऑन दैट रिस्पॉन्स आई एम गोइंग टू गेट create this response. Based on the response from database, I am going to create my response from the backend. But ये तो code है. Database works a little different, right? So to do that, we need a system which can interpret my Node.js का जो भी instruction है into the language which my database can understand. We can do it on our own. We can write our own code. We can write the whole system. But there are these ODMs. One such ODM is Mongoose, and these are called Object Data Model. So what this does is it will understand the language of your Node.js and hit your MongoDB, and it will give a response based on that. So आपका जो सर्वर है to write the instructions and code to change the Node.js request into a MongoDB specific language, that is solved. ये हम Mongoose के लिए कर रहे हैं. Similar to this, अगर आप Postgres database use कर रहे हो या if you are using some other database, there might be a different ODM for that. Okay, one, and if you go through this, there is this Mongo client as well. Let me see if it is here or not. It's not here. Okay, it's not here. I will just search it out and show it to you. So Mongo client is another ODM like that. Okay, so there are 2 different ODMs at the moment, which helps Node.js to understand the language of MongoDB. So this is Mongo client, similar to Mongoose. Both the clients do the same thing. They convert the Node.js request into a language which your MongoDB will understand. ठीक है? तो इसको हम लोग को इंस्टॉल करना होगा, पैकेज यूज करना होगा और कनेक्ट करना होगा अपने डेटाबेस पे, which is this, and then we can start working on this. ज्यादा हो गया क्या आज के लिए? Too much information? Is it like way too much information? Confusion? अभी तो हमने MongoDB का स्ट्रक्चर समझा ही नहीं है कि होता क्या है. अभी तो हमने बस इंस्टॉलेशन और ये देखा है और एक बेसिक ओवरव्यू समझाए। मानस के ऊपर से निकल गया। कितनों के ऊपर से निकल गया? हाउ मेनी ऑफ यू थिंक दैट ये ऊपर से निकल गया? चलो ठीक है, हम लोग फिर अब डाउट लेते हैं। आई डोंट वांट यू गाइस टू कंफ्यूज। इसको टाइम दो। Listen to this. I'm going to share all these links that I have showed you over here on Slack and share the image as well. आज हमने कोई कोड नहीं किया, आज हमने बहुत थ्योरी पढ़ी है, बहुत ज्यादा थ्योरी, राइट? So time for doubts. Let's take some doubts. Record में catch up हो जाता है, nice. Okay. So anyone having any doubt? Any hand raises? Just raise your hand first before the doubt. No doubts? Maybe you need time to understand this. Bikram, correct. That's why I said cloud is easier, but what we need to do is we need to first of all understand locally कैसे ये काम करता है. तो जो विक्रम बोल रहा है, he is talking about Mongo Atlas. यहाँ पे अगर आप देखोगे इनके डॉक्यूमेंटेशन में इंट्रोडक्शन, so on the top it says servers, drivers, cloud, tools, guides, right? तो जो विक्रम जिस चीज की बात कर रहा है वो बात कर रहा है Mongo Atlas की. There are different types of products that is being provided. आपको पता है MongoDB किस पे लिखा गया वैसे? Do you know the language of MongoDB? You must be thinking कि MongoDB खुद एक language है. No, it is written in C++, similar to Node. Yeah, this has been written on top of C++. तो ये जो Atlas है, दिस इज द क्लाउड स्टोरेज. बेसिकली जो हम डिप्लॉय करते हैं अपना डेटाबेस, यूजुअली हमारा क्या होता है कि वी डिप्लॉय द कंटेंट on different servers. That's why we whenever we are trying to create a website we need to buy the domain, क्योंकि फिर domain name और IP address आपको मिलेगा specific to you. Then you need to buy the space for deployment of your website. You need to buy the space to store the data, and that particular space will be in a Node.js environment or a PHP environment or Java environment, and what kind of database you are using. So all these environments will come into picture. So similar to that, Mongo Atlas is a free deployed environment जो आप use कर सकते हो, जहाँ पे आप setup कर सकते हो. So and it will be similar to what we are going to do for local system. It's just that some URLs will change, some names and destination will change. Okay, so that is what we are going to do. Preet, do you have anything to say? Okay, Preet has something to say. He says send all your lectures. Okay, Preet, I'll do that. Anything else? Anyway, so where were we? We were talking about what were we talking about? Yeah. So as I was saying, Atlas or local doesn't make a difference. It's just the connectivity and how the data is modeled, and we are using a name of these models, different models. So Mongo client भी same काम करता है, Mongoose भी same काम करता है. We are going to use Mongoose. Compass भी same काम करेगा, it will help you see the data. RoboMongo भी same काम करेगा, it will help you see the data. I'm going to use RoboMongo. Okay, the choice is yours. You can play around with these applications and set it up in your system so that when we start talking about documents and how it is different from our regular data. Relational database में कितनों ने काम किया है और they know about relational database या database के बारे में जरा भी idea है? Anyone worked with a relational database? What does relational database means? You worked on Firestore. Okay. Firestore is also a very abstracted language. किसी ने regular relational tables पे काम किया है, like using Java या something like that, MySQL? SQL पे काम किया है? Okay. ठीक है, तो हम लोग इसमें कोई भी ज्यादा SQL का काम नहीं करेंगे. Yes, MySQL. I think colleges में there are projects. In my third semester, I remember there was a project where I had to create this database. Database management system करके एक पूरा subject था. If you guys are from computer background, if not, then I don't think you will be facing that. So at that point of time, we created a lot of database, and that gives us a idea of how this works. So let's first of all understand what is relational database. Or let's not do it today, let's do it tomorrow so that we understand the complete flow. ठीक है, अब आपको असली implementation समझ में आएगा वेंकटेश. Okay, so we will take up the doubts. I will save all the details. I will share all the details on the Slack. You can take a look, download it in your system, try to run it and see how it looks like, how you set it up. If you have any doubts, put it on Slack, right? Bikram, for accessing DOM, you can use effect, but why do you want to access DOM directly? You should use ref, because refs are usually linked to directly accessing the DOM elements. क्योंकि रेफरेंस क्या करता है, वो सीधे अपने वर्चुअल DOM से क्रिएट करता है. तो वी शुड ऑलवेज यूज रेफ फॉर दैट. I think आपको ना, I think I'm kind of getting what you want to say. I would suggest you take a look at this thing called React, recently introduced, called portals. React portals. Have you seen that ever or heard about it? Take a look at React portals. Okay. I think that will give you an idea of how you can access different DOMs outside React. Okay. Any doubts for the day, or do you want to go through this videos before having any doubts? And this is very important in terms of understanding the code. अब जब हम लोग code करेंगे, so I will always link you back to whatever we have done today, right? And I will recall that. Do you remember how our data model works? How we were saving the data types? How we were creating models, right? So please remember this. And yes, please do post your doubts on Slack. I think that is it for the day then. If there are no more doubts, I will see you guys tomorrow at the same time with some practical implementation of MongoDB. Create some database, play around on the Node.js environment, and create a REST API. React portals बोला मैंने वेंकटेश, अगर if you're talking about the one that I told Bikram, React portals. तो ये एक लेटेस्ट टेक्नोलॉजी है React की.